Welcome to episode 6 of Next Gen Convos. Today's topic is outgrowing a friendship. Today we'll talk about realizing when a relationship is doing more harm than good, when we should know to call it quits, and setting and maintaining strong boundaries.
The material and information presented here is provided by lived experience youth and for general information purposes only. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are of the guests of our podcast own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Youth Move.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. It is episode 6, and today's discussion, we are discussing about outgrowing a friendship. Today, we'll be talking about realizing when a relationship is doing more harm than good and when we should know to call it quits. We'll discuss setting and maintaining strong boundaries as well. So, with our first question of the day today, what is you guys' experience with toxic relationships and how did you conquer that?
I think, the first step is kind of realizing when something is really unhealthy. So, in my experience, I've had really unhealthy friendships that started to get codependent. And I think when you realize, you know what, every time after I leave this person's house or after I hang out with them, why am I feeling so bad about myself? And why am I angry and sad? And why am I not excited to hang out with this person? And then if you're finding that, when it really matters, you're not really getting the support that you need, maybe it's time to pay attention to that and honor those feelings,
Yeah, I agree. I think my experience is I've had a lot of toxic relationships, one right after another when I started dating, having friends at a teenage age. And then I couldn't really understand why, oh, why are they making fun of me? Why are they doing this to me? And then I just kind of realized over time, I'm maybe I just need to break away from these people because I don't feel like I'm a friend. I feel like I'm being used in some kind of way. I feel like I'm just there for an entertainment type thing. I just really didn't feel good at all. So I agree with that.
So when you realized that you weren't getting the support that you needed and you didn't feel like you were being treated fairly, how did you go about creating that distance and setting boundaries?
For me, basically I was just I can't I can't do this anymore. It's tearing me apart. And they're like, oh, I didn't know, I was doing that. And then the other response I've gotten is oh, well, I don't care. That was the whole point of doing it. And ugh, why couldn't you just tell me you didn't want to hang out with me? And it was just, it was just weird. Why just beat around the bush when you can just come out and say, hey, I don't want to hang out with you. And I've been oh, okay. People just change over time. Either things get worse or things get better. And then when things get worse, you just kind of have to realize those red flags and then just stand up for yourself, kind of advocate for yourself in a way.
Well, good for you that you had that conversation, because it's really hard to start a conversation like that,
It definitely is tough to have those conversations. For the longest time, I've had a difficult time keeping friends because it was always a matter of jealousy being involved. And no matter how I flipped it, reversed it, anything of that sort, it was always to a point where the friend always hated me. And so for me, being a people pleaser was an extremely difficult time trying to navigate how to get out of a relationship, whether it's a relationship or a friendship. It was difficult of me to get out of it because I'm always the type to be well, I can fix it. I can fix it. I can fix it. I can fix it. And there's only so much fixing that you can do until you finally get to a point where you're capped out and you're just I can't take it anymore. You're done. Leave me alone. Or pardon my French, shit hits the ceiling. So it's just like, it's one of those things where you need to find a happy medium. And it's one of those things where you need to take into consideration that you need to have self work for yourself. Because me getting out of, me currently getting out of the relationship that I was in previously, he was not a good guy. He was horrible to me, and it's just like, I kept staying and staying and staying and staying because I was waiting for a different outcome, and that wasn't happening. And so my mom, for many, many years now, has told me, when somebody shows you who they are the first time, believe them. And that's the thing that I want to give advice to you guys, because how they act, whether they're drunk, whether they're high, sober, whatever it is, those thoughts will forever be sober thoughts. No matter what they say or do, that is something that they wanted to tell you beforehand. So know that you need to realize and peep and get a little in tune with yourself about, like, hey, maybe they are being a little funky with me, especially with the way they talk to you, how they say anything to you. Like, for example, I went out with a couple of friends one time, and they kind of pulled me to the side because she was meeting some dude from Tinder or whatever. And so she decided to tell me on the side, was like, hey, you need to change your clothes and you need to tone it down a bit. And so I'm like, what do you mean tone down a bit? And they're like, not crackety jokes or anything like that. I'm like, so being myself, you know? And it's just like, it's that insecurity thing as well, because it's just like, I'm not saying if you're insecure, don't have friends, but you need to check yourself if you are insecure and stuff like that. You need to look within instead of sitting here trying to project your insecurities onto other people.
That's really good advice. Yeah. And don't be friends with people who are trying to dull your sparkle. You know, we're all unique individuals and we're all amazing in our own way. And everybody deserves meaningful and supportive friendships where they can be themselves.
Wow. That's so hard. I'm just thinking about, I don't know if okay, I'm just going to say it anyway. So, like, I think with toxic relationships and friendships or whatnot, there is that huge codependency aspect of like, you can't live without this person. And that is a huge issue for me because I get so attached to someone and it's like I I form my whole world around someone. Even if it's just like a friendship or a relationship or a situationship, like it is just really hard. And then when they I'm having a hard time talking about this specific example because I'm afraid. Well, I don't think he'll listen to this, but I got so like attached to someone that it was like when we ended things, we didn't talk for several months. And then this person came back into the picture. And now it's like, oh my gosh, I can't live without you. And I can't breathe when like, when you're not here type deal. And that is so unhealthy. It is the most unhealthiest thing in the world because anytime, like if he goes days without talking to me, I think I'm this horrible person and all of these things. Like it messes with my mental health. And that's just the worst part about being in toxic relationships. And then also like you can form them the way you want them to be in your head, even if it's not reality. Instead, reality is you're feeling like crap every day. You have no motivation to get up. Like, I mean, like I was gonna marry this dude, and he like controlled every aspect of my life and took me away from my friends, took me away from my church. It was just the hardest thing to do in my life, and I think now it's like it's freeing not to have this person in my life, but I also feel like, oh my God, what do I do?
I appreciate you sharing that story because we're pretty much practically living in the same boat. I almost married that man too. And ooh, I tell you, I dodged a bullet with that one. And the thing is like a discussion that also needs to be involved with this is people need to understand that there are energy vampires in this world. And so they like to consume you completely until you are a raisin and then be like, okay, I'm done here. And my suggestion to you is like, when I finally got over that situation, which I'm still kind of healing from that process, I would say find you some business. And that's the end all be all with it is kind of consume yourself with a lot of things to do. I know that seems kind of like, ooh, that's a little toxic, but also the same breath, it kind of helps you kind of clear your head a little bit because I don't know how many times I done got to a situation where I feel like I was at fault. That whole entire situation was my fault. Maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I'm sitting here thinking like if I could have fixed this situation, it's always a coulda, woulda, shoulda. And you need to stop shoulding yourself. you know, I learned that in uh, coaching. They said stop shoulding yourself. And I'm like, love that. I will keep that. I will write that down. But the thing is that you shouldn't always badger yourself about the situation, but there's also the thing of you need to realize that that was a toxic situation for yourself and you got yourself out of it, regardless if it was years, weeks, days, hours, you still got yourself out of that situation and you should be proud of yourself to get out of that situation when you did, even if it was kind of like last minute or too little too late. You still got yourself out of that situation because it could have been worse, you know?
It takes a lot of strength to like walk away from a friendship, a relationship, especially when you kind of assign so much like, and we all do this, we assign self-worth to like how other people treat us. That's human nature. So it takes a lot of strength to walk away from. And thank you both for being vulnerable and sharing that experience with us. And I'm very proud of both of you. Something we could talk about is when you get to a point where you realize that something is really unhealthy, but you convince yourself that you can fix it because the alternative is like grieving that relationship. And that's sometimes scarier than how you're feeling at the moment. Do you guys have an experience like that?
I do that all the time. I am that person that if I know something is toxic, I'm fully convinced that I can fix it or that I could fix the individual. Like, even if that means I low key would throw some money down. Like, I will do anything to fix a toxic relationship if that means it doesn't end. Like, knowing that like you're about to lose someone because with toxic relationships, they're not all the times aren't all bad times. And we take in consideration all the good times over the bad times. And with that, I'm like, I would grieve the good times we've had and the feelings that I've developed. And I think grieving that is much harder than like just me pretending it's not happening.
It's really good that you realize, like, you know, where you're at when it comes to these situations, but also in the same breath, like, a lot of the times when we have friends and we're trying to like grieve that situation, it's always a lot of like, we're trying to fix it, you know? We're trying to be fix it Felixes right now, and it's not the case, you know? And so another thing that I've been told is you cannot fix someone that does not want to be fixed. And that took a long time for me to realize, like, no matter how many times I tried to fix this person, to fix this man or anything like that, it's never going to change. It's going to stay the same, just slightly different. And that's the other thing too. Um, a lot of the times, people will change for a brief moment to completely gaslight you and being like, oh, they changed, and then instantly revert back to whatever it is that they were doing. So for me, it was extremely difficult because it was just like, it was this pattern of you did something wrong. I called you out. Then you apologize and say, I'm going to change. You change for this X amount of time period. And then we go back through this process. For me, I kind of do now, I do a 3 strikes and you're out kind of situation, which I feel like that's kind of bad on my end for the simple fact that like a lot of people make mistakes in their lives and things of that sort. But for me, I'm so, I don't know what would be the word for it, but I don't want to say traumatized, but also in the same breath, it's just like, it's pretty bad, you know? And it's just like, when it comes to friends, it's just like, I don't have any friends. I'm gonna be honest. Like, outside of you guys, I don't really have friends. I kind of stay to myself. I go to work, go do whatever, and I come back home. Because me thinking about having like specific female friends, it gives me anxiety because it's just like, is this one gonna fight me because they think I'm wanting their man, or are they going to talk about me with the other girls in the group? It's just, it's very just anxiety ridden. And it's just like, I don't want to sit here and go through that. And I don't want to go through that grief because I'm still grieving a best friend that I had for years. Me and her were friends since we were in diapers. And so when we hit around that preteen, teenage stage, bodies were developing, mentals were developing, and she was being weird with her friends towards me, and that was like my sister. And so I finally took it upon myself. I was like, look, if you don't want me in your space, then I will gracefully and quietly exit because I'm not going to make a scene. I'm not going to do all this extra. I'm going to exit. So, my question to you guys would be, how would you navigate trying to regain that relationship? Or do you just completely let it go? Because I don't know how many times I've been like, oh, we're going to get back with this person and we're going to be friends with this person. And then it turns back to that same process. How do you kind of stop yourself from that?
I always try to find just new people to hang out with, even if it doesn't work out, even if they're weird, like you don't have to hang out with them ever again and just keep on trying to find new people to chill with. Yesterday, I was trying to invite 2 friends over. They're a couple, and we were gonna just play cards with my boyfriend, his brother, and then they tried to invite some other people that I didn't really know. And I was like, really? Like, no, we're not gonna do this then. Like, I just had to say no. I don't want, my space is too small for that because I don't know these people. Like, why would I, have like crazy weird people that they know, but I don't know? It felt weird. But if I'm having problems with like my friends, I either tell them like, hey, this problem, and then if they don't understand it, then I just try to go hang out with somebody different. And then I've also cut off that just didn't even like come over when I was like, hey, you want to hang out? And they're just like, oh, yeah, maybe. Yeah. Or they say, yeah, they're going to come over and then they never show up. And I'm like, why even talk to this person again?
That's a really good strategy. Like your original point of kind of trying to branch out and like hang out with new people. If you're in to that point in a friendship or a relationship where like you know that something is unhealthy, but you're kind of not quite ready to take that step of like setting a boundary, breaking up with them, whether it's a friend breakup or a breakup, to kind of like quell that fear of like being alone before you make any rash decisions. Expand your social circle, go out, meet new people, and then like hopefully in that interaction, you'll feel like you're seen and respected, and you'll kind of be more ready to maybe have a conversation with the person who's not treating you the way that you should be treated. So that's some good advice. So we've kind of talked about the signs that something is really unhealthy. And so now maybe at that point where we're ready to like have that conversation and do the friend breakup or set some boundaries and kind of create distance. So you have some choices. I think when you get to that point, you can either, fully cut someone off, or you can just kind of slowly create some distance. What other like options can you guys think of?
Another good one that would really help that I notice that a lot of people do with their families is go low contact and transitioning it to no contact, because that makes it a little less heartbreaking, because I think that's a better way to do it. Unless you're like living with this person, then it's way more difficult, which if you are living with that person, I would suggest like staying with a friend for a little bit, kind of giving yourself space to kind of interact with yourself for a little bit. And I would say kind of journaling helps too, to weigh out some like pros and cons with this situation of what's good about this relationship, what's bad, and if the bads outweigh the goods, then you already know your answer. And if the goods outweigh the bads, then maybe there's some way that you can compromise with this situation, have a discussion with them.
I think, like, really quickly, friend breakups or breakups do in public. That is all I'm going to say.
Yeah, if you're really having like that conversation and you're scared that someone is going to have whatever that reaction is, if you're scared of that reaction, yeah, maybe doing it in public is smart, especially a breakup, if it's been not a good relationship. And like what Soraya was saying about going low contact and then no contact and kind of just like slowly backing away from that, like that's personally worked out best for me because when when you have a friendship that's really intimidating and hostile and like in the past, if this person has been able to like convince you of things and back you into a corner a little bit, like having that conversation is absolutely terrifying. And personally, I think if someone has treated you really badly, you don't really owe them that conversation. Like you don't owe them that closure. So I'm a fan of the ghosting method.
Honestly, with the ghosting method, I've done it before. But the thing is that it kind of gets scary because I've had a few stalkers. So it's just like it could end up really bad for you if you like completely just like flatline the whole entire relationship. I don't know. I just feel like it's a safety thing, especially like if it's a breakup, like completely ghosting them could go so many ways. But since we're on the subject of boundaries, I would like to read out what a boundary is and what it isn't, because a lot of people get it construed that a boundary means that I'm putting it on you and you have to respect that, which that's not what it is. So, in lovely Google, the dictionary, boundaries are limits for you to set for yourself. So that's nobody else, you, yourself. These limits determine what you are willing to participate in and what you are not willing to do. Effective boundaries are about your choices and not other people's choices. This is why setting healthy boundaries are extremely important. So, example of a good boundary. I know this, I know this girl that I used to hang out with all the time. She would go out every night and doesn't get home till like the wee hours of the morning. Me, on the other hand, I don't like being out like that. So the boundary that I would set with myself is I'm not hanging out with this person, or if I do hang out with this person, I will be hanging out until 11:30 p.m. That's my boundary. Now, what people get misconstrued is I'm going to set this boundary as in I'm not going to spend time with you, or if we're going to spend time with each other, you need to learn how to have better time management because people have to work in the morning. That's not her problem. That's not her problem at all. She's in here out until 6 in the morning, 7 o'clock, and then be on her way to work the very next hour. You cannot do that. So you need to put yourself in a situation looking out for yourself. That's how I see boundaries. If I don't like what that other person is doing, that's a me problem, not a them problem. Plain and simple in that order. If I'm not comfortable with going out, then I need to learn, like, hey, these are my times that I want to go out, you know? And if you don't like that person, then completely cut them off, and move on with that situation and find reasonable people to hang out with within your means. That is the other thing too, which I wish I mentioned in our, what was it, like third episode about making friends. Go within your means. So if you are like a old lady, you know, you like to hang out in the little early wee hours of the night, aka 4 to 8 p.m., then that's where you need to be. You don't need to be hanging out with somebody that starts hanging out at 10 p.m. and doesn't get done until like 2, 3 in the morning. That's not within your means. So it's just like that's one of those things. And then also, I would like to mention before I completely forget it, your friends need to also understand your mental. I don't care what it is, because I've had like several people that I still talk to that will get to a point where they're like, hey, I am trying to get myself better mentally. I will not be texting you until 3 months later, you know? And it's kind of back and forth with that situation, because it's also like, you also need to spend time with your friends, but also in the same breath, you also need to have respect enough for them to take time to themselves. It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, I think mental health is really important to bring up here because I've been on both sides of that. And something that is really important to me now in my friendships is, I'm totally upfront about like my mental health and my needs and how, sometimes I might act this way and it's not because of something you've done, it's because of something that's going on in my head. So like I'm upfront about that, but I also never use that like as an excuse. So if somebody is treating you really badly, like if they're straight up mean to you and disrespectful, and then they turn around and like blame that on their mental health and don't take any accountability for how they've treated you, red flag, you know, coming from someone who's absolutely done that and, has unfortunately lost friendships because of my mental health. So like both sides of that suck, but you don't have to put yourself in a position, like boundaries go both ways. You don't have to put yourself in a position where somebody is treating you badly ever for any reason.
Also, like, when people like do something really bad to you or really wrong to you and they come back and say, oh, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. And then they do it again. That's a major red flag to watch out for, because, you don't want to keep going in that cycle, like, oh, I'll just forgive you, and it just never gets resolved.
Something my mom always says is, I'm sorry means you won't do it again. And that sounds like something very simple, but like if I like kids are naughty, whatever. If I was little and I kept doing something bad, pulling the cat's tail, whatever. And every time I got scolded for it, I said, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. My mom would say, if you keep saying sorry for the same thing over and over again, I'm going to stop believing you. I'm not going to believe that you're really sorry anymore. So I learned from a young age that I'm sorry is a very heavy, impactful, meaningful statement. So I don't overuse that. And that's also like come to my advantage when, I think as a girl, as a young woman, we're like trained to always say, I'm sorry, to apologize for whatever it is, like taking up space, being late. And obviously being late is something that we should avoid. But if I show up to a meeting running a couple minutes late, I try not to apologize. I say like, thank you for waiting for me, because that's really what I mean. So that was a little bit off topic, but if someone is apologizing for the same thing over and over and over again, it's understandable if you start to not believe that they're really sorry. And then it might be time to walk away.
I definitely agree. When it comes to apologies, which I've actually been learning about that while I've been, kind of, you know, dealing with all the kids and stuff like that, because they apologize. They say I'm sorry a lot. But the thing is that their apologies are empty, or it's one of those jerky kind of responses. Like, it's one of those things where they'll be like, I'm sorry you feel that way. No, ma'am, no ham, no turkey. We are not doing that, because it's just like, if you're going to apologize, mean it. And we also need to have a conversation about, if you are going to apologize, actually mean it. It's the structure for an apology is, I'm sorry for XYZ. I know how you felt with XYZ. Is there any way I can change this for us? That is a correct apology. Not saying, I'm sorry you feel that way. That's not an apology. That's one of those things where it's just like, I'm just saying sorry because I feel like I have to, even though I don't feel sorry. And that's the other thing too. Do not apologize if you do not feel like you are in the wrong. And it's just like, I know that sounds toxic, but also in the same breath, it's just like, I know several people that do things and don't feel like apologizing for it. And it's like, they know that they did it, but they're just like, what's the point of me apologizing? I'm going to do it again. And that's their mind frame about it. And that's a boundary that you can set with. That's another red flag, is if they don't continue fixing their actions and stuff like that, or apologize, then you know that you need to exit that situation and stuff like that. So I don't know. It's one of those crazy things, because it's just like, I don't understand how people feel like it's okay to think like that. I don't know. It's weird.
Sweet. So we've covered a lot. Quick review. We covered realizing when a relationship is unhealthy and someone is making you feel bad. We've covered, what do you do when you realize that? Maybe you can go out and meet new friends. You can first have a conversation and set your boundaries and say, I'm not comfortable with being treated like this, and that's a boundary for me. And then we've covered that scary conversation and, what to do when it's time to walk away.
I just want to say one last thing for like advice wise. You and your intuition or your gut, I don't know how people roll, you need to listen to that. If you walk in a room with people and they go hush hush and your gut's like, I don't like that, listen to it, because you and your gut and your intuition are going to be your best friend throughout you leaving relationships, leaving work, all of that. That is going to be your main course. So listen to your gut. Your gut is going to be your best friend.
Absolutely. And moral of the story, everyone listening to this deserves to be treated with respect and to be supported and to have meaningful relationships and friendships in their life if that's what they want. Thank you for listening. That was our 6th episode, and have a good one.